Welcome to the Museum of Fine Arts in Ghent, where there is a fantastic exhibition called Jan van Eyck, an optical revolution, that unfortunately had to close during the Corona closure, the lockdown, if you want to. However, we thought it might still be interesting since many people wanted to see the exhibition and couldn't either get tickets or couldn't travel anymore, that we would bring you, a short glimpse of what you have missed, in fact. We have the unique opportunity to look at the paintings from the exterior, and in this case also from the interior of the Ghent altarpiece up close, which is a very sensational and very sort of like rare experience. So here, for example, you start with an exceptionally introduction, that is to say, the Adam and Eve of the Ghent altarpiece. Something which must have been for the contemporaries of Jan van Eyck probably less shocking than for later periods. As we know, these panels were dismantled in the 18th century. They were actually stored. There were over-painted copies that didn't show Adam and Eve naked. But it is the extreme realism. I mean, the focus of even the body hair that sort of makes this kind of very interesting. Something which I had never seen before, but it was becoming extremely clear to me when I was here in the exhibition is, that Eve is giving, she's taken the forbidden fruit from the forbidden tree. And if you look at this fruit, regardless if it's a lemon or whatever, it just looks pretty evil. Huh? Have a look at this. Let's go to Adam. Of course, these are panels that originally sort of the upper tier. So the idea that you would see actually below the toes of Adam makes a lot of sense. And above that, you have, next to Adam and Eve, you have the story of Cain and Abel. That means to say that the original sin had been committed, and then sort of evil came into the world, and in fact, necessitated in the long run the birth of Christ and the sacrificial crucifixion and the promise of eternal life that came with the New Testament. Let's move on. Now here you have actually parts of the exterior of the Ghent altarpiece. So this is a panel, one of the panels that has been restored. It's the reverse of Adam, and you see here is actually part of the Annunciation scene. You see here a beautiful city view, and you actually can see how Jan van Eyck painted all the shadows of the houses on the street. And it's full of details, and you have to really zoom in to see that there are people lurking through the windows, and there are wall paintings above the door, and you can actually identify the house as a house of St. Christopher, etc., etc. So it's full of details, and you wonder, why on earth did Jan van Eyck bother to paint this? Because this was installed somewhere out there. Who was able to see that? So almost obsessive in his way of recording details. And then you have, as you can see, you have this kind of frame. That's part of the Eyckian wit. You see the frame seems to cast its own shadow into the painting. And that is like playing with realism that I think for the contemporaries of Jan van Eyck was really, really something extraordinary. And the fact that the frame is conceived like as a painted stone wall, shows you that I think the idea that this was supposed to be actually windows into something otherworldly that was behind a closed wall. All right, here you have a painting which shows Saint Barbara. And it's again one of these paintings that have caused a lot of discussion in the art historical literature. It's a painting that comes from the Royal Museum of Fine Arts in Antwerp. And it shows the saint in front of a tower. Of course, as you know, Barbara was a saint that was actually kept in a tower and was martyred there. So in a way, Jan van Eyck is able to depict a contemporary cathedral building site and combines that with the image of the martyr itself. And a lot of details in the background shows the working people carrying stones around and a crane that is installed in order to lift stones up to the upper edge. It's a very important painting that gives also ideas of how cathedrals were actually built. What makes this painting special is the fact that it's actually in black and white, and the discussion goes pretty much about, is it an unfinished painting, or was Jan van Eyck already so far that he would actually an unfinished painting would be the equal of a finished one. Now this is a discussion that is not settled. However, if it's unfinished, and there are some arguments for that, it is interesting to note that it has an inscription. It says Johann van Eyck me fietsit, and a date. And that means that the date and the inscription perhaps not in all cases refer to the finishing of the work itself. It's not a date, but may actually refer to the moment that it was conceived in the first time. Well, on the reverse, you see it's also painted. It's sort of like an imitation of stone, jasper or porphyry, etc., etc. And that indicates, of course, there are prints glued on top of that, but it indicates that this painting was to be seen on both sides. That also implies that it was actually turned around. People didn't hang all the paintings on the wall. They were actually used like silverware. They were presented, handled, that part of a performative act, perhaps. Let's look at these two exceptional loans that are here. The St. Francis receiving the stigmata. This is, there are two known versions of that, both associated with Jan van Eyck. One kept at the Turin Galleria Sabauda, the bigger one, and the smaller one, which is a gem of a painting in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And this is actually another of these paintings. It's in beautiful condition. That are intriguing. It has a painted frame, a kind of trompe-l'oeil frame that gives the idea that it sort of creates depth, and it's painted on parchment. So again, parchment glued on wood. So again, sort of proving the association between Jan van Eyck and illuminators. Now, this is an oil painting, and probably by one of the close followers and workshop members by Van Eyck. Now, this room is dedicated to the subject of mother and child. It's a room where we don't have works from the Ghent altarpiece, but it's focused actually on one of two versions of the Madonna and Child, the Madonna and the Fountain. The original is again in Antwerp. It's a gem-like painting that shows the Virgin Mary with the infant Christ in front of a fountain, and you can see how precise Jan van Eyck depicts even the splash of water coming up. Two angels are holding a cloth of honor on her back, and it's a painting that had a great afterlife. Here you have again the inscription of Jan van Eyck, Johann van Eyck me fietsit, 1439, 2 years before his death. And here you have, in fact, almost the same composition by a follower of Eyck, by a workshop member, I think by a workshop member. And this is most likely the version that was actually kept in the collection of Margaret of Austria in Mechelen. This room is called the Word of God, and this is all focused on this Annunciation from the Ghent altarpiece. The Archangel Gabriel approaches the Virgin from the left. Both figures are actually far too big for the room in which they are presented. It's a typical thing of Van Eyck. When figures are standing up, they're almost getting through the roof, and it looks very, very realistic to us. He brings a bouquet of lilies with him as a symbol of the annunciation of the virginality of the Mary, and he speaks the words Ave Maria, Ave Gratia Plena, addressing her appropriately. And what happens then? Mary is sort of like who's sitting praying in front of a prayer book, looks up. She answers to the greetings Ex Ancilla Domini, and Jan van Eyck turns the words around so that they actually be read from above, from the perspective of God. In that moment, the dove of the Holy Ghost enters, and Christ is incarnated. On the top of these two depictions, you have two prophets that actually announce the coming of the Messiah. So again, the Old Testament, the New Testament are given here to show the passing of the Old to the New Testament. Yeah, this is the only painting that we can, with some probability, associate with the patronage of Philip the Good. And it shows again the Annunciation. In a very different way, Jan van Eyck puts that scene into a church interior. The church interior consists of both Gothic and Romanesque features. And again, this is a way of him to indicate the dichotomy between the New and the Old Testament. The archangel comes again from the left, approaches the Virgin. He says, Ave Gratia Plena. She answers, Ex Ancilla Domini, again turned around. And you have seven golden rays that come from the upper window down, representing the seven gifts of the Holy Ghost that manifests itself in the form of a dove up there. In the picture, you have references to the Holy Trinity, like with the three windows behind the Virgin. You have above there, you have a representation of God the Father, and sort of like Romanesque wall paintings depicting the finding of Moses and the receiving of the Ten Commandments. And on the lower edge, you have a few images of Old Testament scenes, being the fight of David and Goliath, the story of Samson, also stories that relate very closely to the idea of the sacrificial death and of Christ and the triumph of the death that is represented by his resurrection. And here we have the Turin Milan hours. This is a book of hours kept in the Museo Civico in Turin that consists of manuscripts from the Limburg brothers, from Charles de Noailles and others around 1400, and then other illuminators from around the 1450s and 60s, all among followers of Van Eyck, but it also consists of two miniatures that are by Van Eyck himself. Here we show the birth of St. John the Baptist, which is a beautiful composition. Well, this interior scene is really sort of remarkable because it has a lot of different aspects to it. There is a view into a room that really foreshadows the work of Vermeer. The landscape painting of the baptism of Christ is really one of the milestones in European landscape painting. So this is an extremely important work, and we are very proud to have it here. Here we have the two grisailles from the lower pier of the Ghent altarpiece, which were the exterior of the painting. They are actually painted in grey, as if they were stone. And both saints, St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist, were actually patron saints of the church that the altarpiece was commissioned for. the Church of St. John, today the Cathedral of St. Barths. And it's really amazing, especially after the restoration, that you see that Van Eyck took great care in order to make a difference between the two different stones that were actually used. This is a different stone than this one. You see the veins of the stone. It's meticulously done, and even in a way that, of course, he competes with contemporary sculpture. But he is trying to show that he's actually even better in doing fake sculptures than the sculptors of his time themselves. We have a few examples here that show sculptures of the period, and I think it becomes increasingly clear. But the concept of Gesei is even worked out even more in two other examples that we have here as well. This is the Annunciation diptych from the Museo Thyssen-Bornemisza in Madrid. And it's an astonishing work. It's a high point of the oeuvre of Jan van Eyck, where he uses only three colors to create a whole effect. And of course, the use of three colors, black, white, and red, is something that Pliny, the antique author, recommends, and we know that Jan van Eyck, of course, was reading Pliny himself. Now here you see the Annunciation taking place as, again, painted sculpture. You see how the wings of the angel are sort of like foreshadowing the frame. It comes out of the frame, and you see little reflections of the figures in the polished background. And if you look at the Virgin Mary, you even see that the dove, which is physically impossible, is sort of like flying, but it's at the same time presumably static. We are coming towards the end of the exhibition. Every exhibition is trying to build up suspense, and this is probably one of the most impressive rooms in the entire exhibition. It's devoted to portraiture. This is a painting that comes from the Brukenthal collection in Sibiu, Hermannstadt in Romania, and it's probably the earliest portrait that we know of Van Eyck. We can assume it's early because of the blue headdress that the man is wearing. It's a headdress that was on fashion in the late 1420s, early 1430s, so it's very likely to predate actually any other paintings by Jan van Eyck. And what do we see here is a man who is sort of like looking indecisive into the space. He holds in his right hand, he holds a ring. He presents a ring. It's almost like a proxy portrait where he offers somebody to marry her and awaits her answer, because that's sort of very typical thing that Jan van Eyck does. He depicts the ear as if he wanted to say, now I'm waiting for what you're saying, and the ear is very centrally actually depicted. And these kind of games, if you want to, are something that we see with Van Eyck rather often. They are compelling tricks that enhance the realism of the images. An exhibition is always a welcome opportunity to look into the possibilities if things need to be restored. And this painting, which represents the Hainaut nobleman Baudouin de Lannoy, somebody at the court of Burgundy, was restored on the occasion of the exhibition at the Berlin Gemäldegalerie. So it's now really an amazingly fresh painting. It shows this military leader with the coat of the Golden Fleece, the Order of the Golden Fleece, the chivalric order that Philip the Good founded in 1432. And it shows him again sort of looking to the right, to his right, and in a costly brocade pattern, probably a present by Philip the Good. Jan van Eyck and Baudouin de Lannoy knew each other presumably very well, because they were both members of the aforementioned embassy to Isabella of Portugal, where Jan van Eyck painted the portrait, so they must have spent a lot of time on the boat. However, this portrait is painted a few years later because, as I said, he has the insignia of the Golden Fleece with him. This is almost the same concept as the men with the blue headdress that we saw earlier, but the context is entirely different. Here Jan van Eyck depicts a man called Jan de Leeuw, who is actually a goldsmith, and so unlike in that other portrait where in all likelihood it was like an offering of marriage, here the gesture of the offering of marriage is actually ridiculed and it's played about. So somebody who sees that portrait would assume this is actually somebody offering the ring for marriage, but in fact he who reads the inscription of the original frame, which is kind of a riddled frame, would realize that in fact it's a goldsmith who is actually teasing you with his merchandise, if you want to. The inscription is in Netherlandish, and it's kind of a reference to the birthdays of the man Jan de Leeuw. It's a small lion actually depicted instead of the name, and it's sort of like it hints to Jan van Eyck's presence in Bruges in the culture of the rhetoricians of the period. Rhetoricians were people that were craftsmen who actually also acted as poets. And the first chamber of rhetoricians was actually founded in Bruges in 1428. And among the founding members were painters like Louis Allingbrod, a contemporary of Jan van Eyck. So, in other words, this kind of municipal culture, this urban culture, was very, very important of Van Eyck. And this was probably one of the very few people who were able to commission a portrait from his friend in order to display in this kind of corporate and guild context. This portrait, a Leal souvenir, is another radical. Many of these works by Van Eyck keep their secrets, and that's also very challenging in order to work on these things. You see here a man behind a stone parapet. This is a painting from the National Gallery that has also been cleaned specifically for the exhibition. You see how beautiful the hand is actually protruding, making it illusionistic transfer into the realm of reality. It says here Leal souvenir, so a good image, and above that it says Timotheus and then Actum Anno Domini 1432, and then Johannes de Eyck. This is a rather interesting inscription because Actum refers to a legal act. Timotheus is in Greek letters, so it's absolutely not clear, and the entire image looks like a memorial portrait. So, is it a memorial portrait? Is it a memorial portrait that hints at a deed that has been executed, is memorized in this painting? All these things are entirely unclear, but it's sort of like fascinating to speculate about it. Remarkable portraits of the donors of the Ghent altarpiece, that is Jodocus Veit and Elisabeth Borluut. So here where I stand, you would have to imagine the two St. John's in Grisaille, and then you would have the entire register. What is interesting to see is that these figures are depicted in the same niches, but again, if they would raise, they would actually be too big for the space that they are conceived for. Now, these paintings have altered so dramatically because all the overpaint has been removed during the restoration, and it is in a way incredible to see them in their restored form. When the Ghent altarpiece was installed in the Church of St. John, today the Cathedral of St. Barths, in 1432, it must have been for the contemporaries a revelation. Never before had they seen lifelike figures like this, and I was wondering what would have happened to people who would have been looking at this lady here, and while the lady was standing next to them, were they confused about the identity of these people? did they take the painting for the real thing, and all these things. We can't imagine what the impact of such images must have been at a time when imagery was not omnipresent as it is now, but was a very seldom and rare commodity. This, ladies and gentlemen, is unfortunately the end of this short tour that I had the privilege of giving to you. I hope you enjoyed looking at the reproductions that we were able to show you here, and to provide you with a sense of what this exhibition is about. For those who have visited, it's probably a welcome memory. For those who haven't been able to visit, it's probably a welcome manner to familiarize yourself with the oeuvre of this exceptional artist, Jan van Eyck. Thank you very much.